During Lent and Advent, they coordinate the readings so that the first reading and the Gospels sort of fit together. But then in the rest of the year, they really don't do that, which is why it's very fortunate that we have two readings that speak about a similar thing. Paul says farewell to the community, the leaders of Ephesus. Jesus is saying farewell to his disciples. And it's obvious in both of those readings that both Paul and Jesus loved the people they were commending to the Lord. In fact, in Paul, you hear about the people weeping so loud that people were noticing. Our faith is not simply a question of intellectual knowledge. It's also a question of heart. I'm a Franciscan. I've got to say that. If you want an intellectual answer, go to a Jesuit, go to a Dominican. If you want someone to cry in the confessional with you, go to a Franciscan. God loves us, and we're supposed to love each other and love God in return. Let's take only one part of that today, loving God. I was giving a workshop 2 years ago, and one of the young men in formation raised his hand and says, I have a question, Jude. Do you love God? It really threw me. And I decided I wasn't going to give him a flip answer. Yes, of course. I was going to pray on it for 24 hours. And I did. And when I came back, I said, you know what? I do love God. But it's not like when I was a young man, when it was all enthusiastic and flowers and, Cecil B. DeMille's. It's like an old couple. Husband begins a phrase, wife ends it. Wife begins a phrase, husband ends it. I don't mean to be too idealistic, because I know there are days you pray for sunshine so your spouse will go for a walk or go play golf. That happens too. But I saw it with my folks. They were in their 80s, and they would walk down the street hand in hand, something I had not seen from the time they were young. Now, part of it was that mom had a bit of vertigo and dad had a stroke. But God uses even those means to have them walk hand in hand. And that's what I felt in my relationship with God. But what does it mean to love God? There are relationships in our life which are at the edge. If you see we call them acquaintances. If you see an acquaintance at the shopping mall, what do? Kind of wave. And if they're right there, you're kind of embarrassed because you don't remember if she's married, you don't remember if he's still working. You try to talk around those things. And if they're talkative, you find yourself glancing at your watch and you say something like, gee, I'm sorry, I have something important to do, which of course says, what about them? Chop liver, right? And if you do a favor for an acquaintance, you expect something in return. Now, half of us are thinking, oh no, I would never be like that. Think of your Christmas card list. If they don't send you a Christmas card 3 years running, they're off the list, aren't they? For some people, God's an acquaintance. They'll wave, they'll give them an hour a week, but boy, they're checking their watch if Mass goes too long. When we still had second hands on the watches, the preacher professor said, don't worry when they look at the watch. Worry when they put it to their ear. Then you're in trouble. And if they do God a favor, God owes them. In fact, sometimes people even try to bribe God. They buy a lottery ticket, and if I win, I'll give a third to the church, as if God accepts bribes. For some people, God is an acquaintance. And for other people, God is a friend. A friend is a person, when you see that person at the shopping mall, you don't wave, you go over. And when you're talking to a friend, you lose track of time. Have you ever been at Eucharistic adoration? You thought it was 5 minutes and it was an hour? Because you just lost track of time. And doing a favor for a friend, you don't expect anything in return, because the joy was in doing the favor. And then there's people whom we truly love. a person we love, the first thought of the day is of that person, and the last thought of the day is of that person. Morning and evening prayers, that's what that's all about. And when I say the first thought of the day is of that person, when we're talking about God, I don't mean waking up and saying, oh God, it's morning. So it's something a little more positive than that. And when you spend time with a friend, it's such a joy. And when you walk outside, everything you see reminds you of that love. Walk on our property. You've got the squirrels jumping around. You've got a whole herd of deer crossing the road. You have the flowers. You have the birds singing. How can you not see God's presence in all of that? God's goodness. But we have to look with the eyes of children, don't we? Because for some of us, we're thinking, oh, I hope that squirrel doesn't run in front of my tire, instead of saying, what a beautiful little animal. It's like, have you ever had a 3-year-old grandchild see her first butterfly? And she's so filled with wonder, she falls on her back end and comes to Grandpa and Grandma and says, oh, I saw the most beautiful animal. Or an 8-month-old seeing his hand for the first time. And he does this for 20 minutes. Not even quite sure it's attached to his body, but he's filled with wonder. When we're in love, we find a true sense of peace, a true sense of joy. It's good to be here. It's good for you to be here with me, because I can't make it without you. That's what faith is all about. Faith is not believing a certain number of things in the catechism. Faith is trusting and loving. Faith means that, again, we can't think of living eternity without God, because God certainly can't think of living eternity without us.